All right. Good morning, PT on Ice. Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to the Leadership Organizational Development Thursday. Always a little break from the PT content that streams at you guys throughout the week. Always fun things to chat and fun topics to cover. So how's everybody doing? I, for one, am heading to Birmingham, Alabama tomorrow. So for those who are going to be at Dreyer for the conference on the cervical spine, of course, this weekend, looking forward to seeing you there. And then I'm going to jump from Birmingham to Knoxville, Tennessee, and we have our South College lab to hammer out next week. To those already down at South College, hope you're having a blast. I look forward to joining you on Monday for a full week of musculoskeletal. So that's coming up, and then we're going to jump right back here next weekend for a course in Greeley, Colorado. Have Zach Morgan, Alexis Morgan coming up and join me with that one, so that should be a hoot. So starting tomorrow morning, we are going to go Birmingham to Knoxville, Tennessee, back to Colorado, and then back to Raleigh, North Carolina. It's going to be a really busy next handful of weeks, but it's going to be a great December. So hope everybody's doing great. Virtual Ice closes up Tuesday. So if you want to jump into our virtual mentorship and hang out with us every Tuesday, make sure you get on that. I'll drop a link here underneath the video when the time is right. So we're a little bit early. I'm not sure how many folks are going to jump on, but I want to jump in today and I want to talk about deep work. So many of you are going to be familiar with this, right? So the book came out, I'm not sure how long ago, but Cal Newport's book, Deep Work, and it got recommended to me several times. And I finally got a chance to get after it on the airplane when we were coming back from Chicago following the Thanksgiving holiday. And I got to say, overall, okay, first of all, I went in biased. Right? I went in biased thinking I really need deep work. Like, there's so many different irons in the fire, and that can't be good, and the overall negative effects of social media, etc. So I definitely went in with this mindset of like, this is going to be huge. And I got to say, overall, I was disappointed. So the layout, first of all, let me explain. The layout is, the book kind of goes through, what deep work is, why it's important, and then strategies on how to execute it. It's kind of like what it is, why it's important, and then strategies. I would just say I was disappointed in the book from the sense that I thought it was going to be like the Why We Sleep of productivity books. Like, I recently read Why We Sleep, and I was absolutely blown away. Matthew Walker's book, and I thought, man, this is incredible. And then I jumped into Deep Sleep, and it lacked the substance, right? It was a lot lighter, a lot of case examples. It was lighter on hard science, which is fine. Maybe it was just my expectation didn't correlate with what the book wound up being. But overall, I thought, I wasn't overly impressed with the book. But let's talk a bit about what we learned from it, because I will give it to the book that it made me think a lot. Maybe my conclusion coming out to be not as popular of one as most folks walking away from the book. So first of all, let's chat about the benefits, because certainly the book did a good job of laying out some of the benefits that come from deep work. Like, for example, innovation, right? So the ability to really take challenging amounts of work or challenging complexity of work, right? Understanding it and synthesizing original bodies of work from it. So a lot of the examples in the book were, people who were writing, very original scientific pieces, right? Or authors who were writing, very complex stories. And again, it was this idea of going deep to create innovation, right? And I totally see that. Like, if that's what you need to do, like if you need to really go deep, I think about Christina Previtt, one of our ICE faculty, finishing up her PhD work. And I think actually Christina posted about this book a while back. But I can imagine that deep work is incredibly valuable for her at this time, because doing your PhD requires the synthesis of a massive amount of information and the contribution of original material based from that synthesis, right? Which nothing could more require going extraordinarily deep, right, into a subject matter and into your own mind to create this kind of original work. So I can completely appreciate that if creating truly innovative things of substance that are going to change the game, that require the synthesis of complex material, there's no doubt that original going deep has tremendous value. Along those same lines, talked a lot about improving focus, right? And specifically that, switching from task to task has consequences. Inattention residue. And that was a great chapter. And it talked a lot about how, we all know the downsides of multitasking as far as focus, but it spoke a lot to this concept of attention residue, right? That when you go to your next task, there is still a lot of your brain that is concentrating on the previous task. So your ability to maybe deliver your absolute highest level of focus, right, or your absolute best work on that next task, especially early on in the conversion, is challenged by this concept of attention residue. And so I think being mindful of the fact that when you're switching task to task, your ability to execute at your absolute highest level, especially early on in that next task, is probably challenged. And so I think the book did a great job of showing that when you need to go big, when you need to have your absolute best, all your neurons firing, right, to synthesize a massive amount of complex material and create original, innovative work, to be in that space, I couldn't agree more that going deep, and the book does a very nice job of presenting that material, that going deep is critical. But the question is, how many people does that really apply to? Right? So as I read the book, in one of the chapters I really appreciated was I'm not sure, it's hard when you listen on Audible because I'm never sure if we jump chapter because oftentimes you're just sort of hearing the book go along. But they had a section on, well, what about Jack Dorsey, right? Who is the CEO of Twitter, the CEO of Square, I think the co-founder of Twitter and the sole founder of Square, but obviously just a ragingly successful tech gentleman. And talking about, what about Jack Dorsey, who discusses how his life is the exact opposite. Right, so he almost intentionally avoids deep work, but instead leverages availability. Right, talks about how he's always out in the open. Right, anybody can walk up to him at any time. So literally creating a setup where deep work is almost by organization impossible, and having a massive amount of success. Right, and so I think that really gets me thinking that there's nothing inherently good or bad about deep work. Although the idea of deep work is so appealing right now because it's so the opposite of kind of what's happening in society. So that creates kind of this allure and this appeal that is cool, right? But I would argue that there's nothing necessarily, right, better or worse about deep work. It's that it's incredibly useful for the things we mentioned above. But when you look at Jack Dorsey, right, probably not as useful in that space, which really brings to the culmination that it really matters what role you play in your team. Right? So when people say, well, is deep work good? I would argue, well, it depends on what you personally are trying to accomplish. Right? So like when I critically examine myself and the current status or current role that I'm in, right, the best use of my time by far is a 10-hour day of 10-minute conversations. Right? Because most of my life right now in the current space that I'm at requires a lot of short briefs of strategy. Right? Answering certain positions that we are trying to move something forward that happen relatively quickly. Little bouts of inspiration, right? Talking to a team member and chatting about where they're going and making sure that we're going the right direction, that we're excited about it. Having tough conversations that tend to be brief, right? Where maybe something isn't going well in the company or a customer is not satisfied. And I mean, I'm a firm believer in reaching out personally and having that tough conversation, but they don't tend to go on for very long, right? And they don't tend to require synthesis of extremely complex material to create innovative work. It just requires your presence, right? Being there, right? Being able to think in the moment, relate to the individual, provide good customer service, right? But it really is a 10-hour day of 10-minute conversations. Now, as always, there's exceptions to that, right? I think about once a year when I personally sit down and look at my 2 courses that I teach for ICE and do my annual update and look at all the material that came out and think to myself, what needs to go in? What about this course needs to change so we remain as close to the absolute evidence-based cusp as we possibly can? So those moments certainly require withdrawing to the basement and finding a space where for hours and hours you can synthesize that material and say what needs to go in. So there are certain moments, right? Industrial health podcasts and lectures, right? Things we're developing for the companies here in Northern Colorado. When we're going to go out and give these big lectures, certainly those require that. But that is an extraordinarily small fraction of at least my time. So this brings me to my overall thoughts. So kind of thinking about the book, thinking about these different roles, thinking about my personal role, brings me to kind of my overall reflections. And what I come to is that every team needs a blend of generally deep workers and people who are generally in the shallows, and then everybody needs to be reasonably flexible, right? So you're not going to believe this, but I really fell on an and not or sort of a philosophy here as regards to deep work, right? So there's some keys to making this work though. So hey, what's up, Brian? Good to see you, man. So, the rest of my flight back, so the one thing about United Express jets, they don't have Wi-Fi, right? So this, first of all, was a very appropriate place to listen to deep work. And then I had some time afterwards as well to kind of sit and reflect. My family was cashed out behind me. And I was really thinking about how does this affect teams? My team, our team, other teams. And the first thought was that you really need a combination of these workers. But there's some keys to making it happen. Okay, the first one is that everybody knows who they are and who everybody else is. Right? In that they facilitate and tolerate each other. Okay, what I mean by that, right, is that first of all, you need to know who you are on the team. Like, what is your unique contribution? Is it developing and synthesizing material and putting forward products that are absolute best in class, right? Or is it being customer service all day, every day, being tapped on the shoulder, having to facilitate, having to transfer information, right? Having to answer quick questions that were stymieing the growth of a whole section so that section can move forward, right? So is that you jumping around being in the shallows, right? You're not synthesizing massive amounts of information. You're being readily available so every aspect and every cylinder of the engine can keep running. So knowing who you are, right? What is it? How does your role in the team reflect your need for deep work? Knowing who the other people are so that you know what to expect out of them, right? So what I mean by that is folks in the shallows need to leave the deep workers alone. And I know that can be excruciating, right? I'm in the shallows, right? I know that can be excruciating because you're like, I really want to tell that person something because it's important in my world, right? And I want to ask them a quick question. But what we often need to do is realize the deep workers, right, are developing content or doing things that are requiring them to be in that space of mental processing that if interrupted, the deep work book clearly illustrates is catastrophic. Right, to their ability to create that synthesis. So it's important that those in the shallows, those hustles that are kind of moving around, poking people, keeping the engines running, stoking the stoves, those people need to leave the deep workers alone, which can be tough. Deep workers, right? You got to stop expecting deep work out of the people in the shallows, right? So I know, and I won't mention any names, right? There's one individual in our company specifically right now who I know it's killing him or her, right? We'll leave it ambiguous, that I have not gotten to this deep review of one of our courses, right? And I want to, like I do. But there's so many things going on requiring very small amounts of attention, right, across a lot of different platforms that it's tough for me at this particular couple of months to carve out this big chunk of time. Now, I appreciate the value of doing it, right? But it's important to think about, is it the best use of my time right now? And so there's always kind of that responsibility of people who are doing deep work to recognize that people in the shallows need to be in the shallows and can't often be pulled into that deep workspace. This is why good communication is key. Because if we can get all of these cylinders firing on a team, right? If you can get people who are doing deep work, know what and why they're doing, right? And how it's contributing to the overall mission. People in the shallows, right, who are connecting as that content comes out and is produced and is of the highest quality, those people are connecting it to the entire network, making it available, right, plugging it into different parts of the system where it can be utilized. If these two engines are running simultaneously in a company, you're going to be unbeatable. But there's got to be a lot of tolerance, right, in between those groups. And to have that tolerance, there's got to be great communication. And I love some of the parts of the book Deep Work where they talked about it's fine to disconnect, but you do need to let everybody know the parameters of it, right? How long it's going to go on, why it's happening. And I think if that good communication takes place and the individuals are coming at it from different spots, know where everybody is and know why they are there, then they can facilitate each other in those different positions and combine those different positions to make a maximally functional organization. So I really think that's where it's at. It's people on your team knowing, hey, I do a lot of deep work. I retreat a lot because my job requires it because of the benefits that deep work creates, right? It gives me that chance to synthesize all the information, to get the noise out of my head and really deliver a best in quality product that we can then plug into the machine and maneuver across the entire network. Whereas folks in the shallows know, I really don't have either the need or the luxury to be in deep work because my job is to always be facilitating conversations, right? Be readily available, right? Don't allow little things to stop different drives of your company, right? Don't allow little hiccups or little problems, right, to fully stop the development of products or in our case, courses or rollouts. Don't allow those things to stop an entire group focusing on that progression. If you can jump in real quick and say, oh, here's a solution. Okay, guys, go ahead and move on, right? So know why you're in the shallows, right? And quite honestly, stay in the shallows, right? But be aware of how each other is trying to work towards the betterment of the organization. Now, I want to finish with a part that's probably going to be controversial, right? But we'll throw it out there. And I just want to say that there's undeniably an increased shift towards blocking your schedule, right? Doing all of your emails at 1 hour of the day, right? And really taking deep work and doing a blocked approach to it, right? Now, I do not doubt that both the quality of your work, that if you compared a 93% to a 98%, the quality of your work is higher when you do that. I don't doubt the quality of your life is higher, right? It can be agonizing to be pulled from one thing to another and feel as though you never really got to deliver a best-in-class product, right? You never got to be a craftsman. And how romantic is that, right? Like going out into the solitude and doing your absolute best work, right? And being able to present that after a long, deep dive into all aspects of it. You think about the wood maker, right? And working with that piece of wood quietly in the garage and eventually outrolling that handmade canoe, right? Like nothing is more romantic than being a craftsman. Nothing is more currently trendy than blocking your schedule, right? And increasing your productivity during those moments, right? And minimizing attention residue shift. The question I would ask is it really about you though? Right? So I don't deny that your quality is a couple points higher, right? I don't deny the quality of your life is a couple points higher, right? But is it about you? Is that really what your team benefits the most from you do? There's no doubt it's best for you from a mental health standpoint, from a feeling of accomplishment standpoint, from an overall enjoyability of work standpoint. I mean, everybody would love to block their things into discrete points, right? Imagine being able to actually deliver on all of those and feel they were all of your absolute highest quality. That is very little neural strain, right? But is it what your team needs the most? Or are you doing it for you? It's a fair question. And I think someone's got to pose it, right? I think about my dad as a very interesting example. So, my dad, for those of you who have listened to the podcast for a long time, I've told stories about my dad. He's always a tremendous business mentor for me. And kind of, very short story, kind of grew up from nothing in Detroit and wound up being the CEO of a big engineering company in Northern Michigan. And just a really incredible story considering kind of where they came from and where he wound up. And one thing he always told me was, Jeff, I'm always available to my guys. Right? So it was mostly guys. They were a surveying crew, right? But I'm always available to my team, right? Always, at all times, 24 hours a day. I am readily available to my team. That was a real point of pride for him, right? He was at their beck and call. Now, he was their leader, right? But he was absolutely at their beck and call. I remember a million examples, but I'll give you guys one. So it was in the winter back in Upper Michigan, right? And he got a call from a guy in Minneapolis, from MDOT. So that's the Minnesota Department of Transportation. So my old man was in surveying, so surveying engineering. So oftentimes they would work with Department of Transportations, right? And so he got a call from these guys. Now, mind you, it's blizzarding, right? As usual in the middle of the winter in Upper Michigan. It's a terrible day, right? Nobody wants to drive. This guy brings up a concern about one of the projects that Coleman Engineering is doing over in Minneapolis. And the old man said, guys, I got to go. He hops in his truck and he drives to Minneapolis, right? Which is just a really heavy-handed response to something that maybe could have taken place right there. Maybe a phone call, getting a meeting together, doing it virtually, etc. But he came back and I said, Dad, what was with that? And he told the story. He said, Jeff, you got to understand, man, that being at someone's beck and call is ultimately what customer service is all about, right? Now, that might have been a little bit extreme, right? Wanting to have that discussion in person because it was a serious conversation, at least on my end, I believed. But the reality is the way the conversation wound up was the guy said, Jim, I can't believe you came all the way over the same day. This job is yours, right? So there was some competition going on and the guy was like, forget about it. This level of being on the ball, answering that phone immediately, getting in the car immediately, getting after it, that is the kind of customer service, that is the kind of on-call demand Not when you get to it at 8 because that's the time you have set aside because you're going to demand all of your attention to handling your email tasks. But getting to it because the guy called and the problem was happening right then. It creates a very different experience on the other end for that individual. And I think there's something to be said, and maybe something that's being lost in the sexiness of all of us taking our own schedules and saying, well, this is my schedule, right? Here's when I do all my emails. Here's when I do all of these things, right? I think sometimes I don't want to overstate this, but we're really saying, look, it's all about me. Like this is not about like what you guys need. It's about the way I like to do things. And there's some things I think we've really got to reflect on there. And so my dad was always an example of the exact opposite. Apparently Jack Dorsey is an example of the opposite. But give that some thought and just question yourself. If you're going to go deep and you're going to block your schedule, just make sure that the results of doing that, right, are what's absolutely critical to the team that you contribute, right? If not, think about the benefits of staying in the shallows. Okay, I realize I've been here for like a half an hour. I was fascinated by the book. I was really surprised by my thoughts about it. And I was not surprised, but I think it requires that all of us zoom out and say, hey, maybe there's and not or here. And what is the best way for me personally in my position for the team to behave on a daily basis? Guys, cheers. I'll see a bunch of you in Alabama on Saturday, many of you in Knoxville, Tennessee, and then a bunch of you back here in Greeley, Colorado. So take care, everybody. Sorry it was so long, but this book really got me thinking. Cheers, everybody.